Premier League title race may well be decided by mood. Now, that might sound absurd when you consider that Pep Guardiola is maybe the most tactically sophisticated coach in history, that he is applying that sophistication in the context of everything that Manchester City are and the lavish wealth of that project. Then you've got that Miguel Arteta is one of the most tactically refined coaches in history, so meticulous about everything he does, where no corner is left uncovered. And yes, it could come down to vibes, mood. But, I mean, there is an obvious logic amid that emotion. And it's something that particularly struck me as I watched Arsenal's 1-0 win away to Sporting in the Champions League. I'm just back from the game in my hotel in Lisbon where I'm doing this video, and as you can see it from the accreditation around my neck. But, I mean, that felt like a really big win, and not just because it puts Arsenal on the brink of a second successive Champions League semi-final for the first time in their history, amazingly, but also because of how important it was in the context of the season. I mean, I said in my match report for The Independent, you can check it out online, but that it wasn't just that they did what was required. It was a win that they needed. Because obviously, the build-up to this Champions League game, and obviously to a degree it was a build-up to Saturday's game against Bournemouth because everything is so intertwined at this point. But that build-up was obviously characterised by all the noise about how those two domestic cup defeats, the one in the FA Cup to Southampton at the weekend, and the one 2 weeks ago in the Carabao Cup to Manchester City, which has now been seen as maybe being responsible for a huge emotional shift in this entire title race. But yeah, obviously those two domestic cup defeats had been seen as maybe as potentially dampening the mood around Arsenal, affecting confidence, bringing another sort of malaise around the team. And if that is true, which I do think it sort of is, I think obviously, like in a campaign like this, no individual match can be just removed from the context of the other games. But if that is true, that those two domestic defeats obviously caused, again, this atmosphere around Arsenal, an atmosphere of angst, of tension, then what will the effect of this 1-0 win over Sporting be? I mean, look, in the most basic sense, and from speaking to people around the club, and from the way Arteta spoke after the game, they're pointing to the mood in the dressing room afterwards, and that's something that always comes after a last-minute winner, as Kai Havertz's goal was. It was in the nature of that winner, I suppose, where in a game where Arsenal had seemed to be playing within themselves, Martin Delaney just decided to step up. He broke the lines, he did what Arsenal hadn't been doing, and set up Havertz with what was really a beautifully taken goal and a very fluid move that will also kind of encourage confidence as well. But yeah, it's the emotion, it's the confidence, and also it's just, it changes the entire feel around the place. Arsenal have that good feeling back after 2 weeks where you could say was a little bit, where again, the only word to use is noise around the club. Whereas this, it restores that good feeling just at the right time. And I think that feeling, that mood, is all the more crucial because for all that the game has rightly become a more scientific game, a more analytical game, a more tactical game, where all of these elements are maximised by what are very well-run clubs at this level, especially under these two managerial tenures, both Guardiola's and Arteta, where, we are really talking about, despite debates about the quality of the football now, and despite debates about England and the Champions League, say, we are talking about two clubs or two teams that really, I suppose, kind of, look to maximise what is possible in football, even if people would debate what that looks like. But within that context, that doesn't actually negate the effect of emotion. It makes it all the more important because emotion, mood, amplifies what is possible. I'm speaking to people who, with knowledge of both teams over the past few weeks, the line that keeps going back to me, I said it in my piece, in my preview to the Sporting game, momentum in football is everything. Now, it has become a word that, I suppose, in maybe some certain analytical circles, was a little bit of a dirty word for a while, momentum, because it's difficult to quantify. There were even kind of discussions about how mathematically it wasn't true, that you can't measure momentum in that way. But look, when you speak to people within clubs, even those who obviously believe in all of the modern scientific advances in football, right down, of course, to the use of XG and analytics and all that, they would still say that even if we don't have a model yet to quantify what momentum is, it matters. It's crucial. You can feel it in a dressing room. And suddenly, one win can change everything. I mean, we saw that with City. It's difficult not to think that the win over Liverpool, at least that scale of victory, the 4-0, and how impressive they were in periods of that game, even allowing for Liverpool's own issues, that wouldn't have happened without the way they beat Arsenal in the Carabao Cup final. And look, I mean, there is obviously a tendency to maybe overanalyze games like that final. I think it was, maybe I wrote this myself on the day after the game, I think it was a largely 50-50 game that Guardiola ultimately won with through a tactical shift and intuiting a weakness in Arsenal that came from the fact that Kepa ultimately can't play the ball like David Raya can. So I don't think it necessarily spoke to too much difference between the teams, but that final, it still can have a huge psychological effect, which I think it did. So even though it's not necessarily seismic in the scale of the season, I do think it changed the mood around City, restored a confidence and consequently in level. And again, if you talk to anyone in dressing rooms, they would say when teams feel that momentum, that emotional momentum, it does amplify performance. I think crucially as well, at stages of the season where physical fatigue becomes an issue, and physical fatigue does start to cause mental fatigue, that feeling of victory, especially victories in big games or in big moments like Arsenal's win against Sporting, they'll take you through fatigue. They will kind of temporarily elevate performance. I mean, obviously, it's not a fail-safe. It's not a magical elixir. The effect of that does run out. But that's why, I mean, victories become momentum in themselves. And I suppose I'm going around the houses a little bit here, but that is why this win, I feel, over Sporting was so crucial for Arsenal. I mean, just even instantly, imagine it had stayed 0-0. I mean, it would have been a good result for Arsenal. I think from the way they approached the game, Arteta would obviously have been content with it. Again, I say they largely played within themselves. It looked like a controlled display. I think that was necessary for a few reasons. One, obviously, being, again, that noise around the club from those defeats to City and Southampton. They probably just needed to stabilise a bit. There's then the fact that, as Arsenal figures, people around the club will willingly say now, that up to this point, and as will be the case until the FA Cup semi-final, they are the only English team to have played in every single game this season. They've only had 2 free midweeks since August. That obviously has a cumulative effect. It does mean there are occasions that they have to not necessarily conserve energy, but they obviously have to be strategic about these things. And I think that was borne out in a performance, or for 90 minutes of the performance against Sporting, where because I mean, they could have gone all out in the way maybe people want them to, in a way that's obviously formed such a debate around this season. But Arsenal know that Saturday is the bigger one for them, not just because the title is the one they want more than anything, even more so than the Champions League this season, but also because with this Sporting game, they know there's a second chance at it. There is a second leg. But so 0-0 would have been fine. But even if it had been 0-0, I suppose they would have gone into that game at the weekend with still maybe a bit more tetchiness about them going into the match, because it would have been 3 games without a win. It would have been only 1 goal in 3 games. And even if they were all cup competitions, I think this is what we mean when we're talking about how the context of every individual game influences the next individual game, regardless of competition. Whereas now, and the other point to that, of course, as well, is that it wouldn't just have been about Saturday and how they might have been that bit tetchier or on edge because they still hadn't won this game, because it had been 0-0. I think there still would have been an element of, a little bit of trepidation around Arsenal because of the need to get, I suppose, back on track, which they wouldn't have done. It was 0-0. But also, of course, because it wouldn't just been about Saturday, they would have been conscious of the second leg against Sporting on Wednesday, and would have obviously had that on their minds. Whereas now, obviously, that second leg suddenly looks so much more forgiving because they won 1-0. But also, yes, there is the emotional momentum from this victory. And again, the mood that can only come from a last-minute winner like that, from winning that way. Like Arsenal have that good feeling back. And suddenly now it's, I suppose, it's a counter to what City have been feeling. And this thing, I did my newsletter, Inside Football, about this a few weeks ago, where when the title race was admittedly that bit closer than 9 points, albeit with Arsenal having played a game more, that there can be a bit of a seesaw back and forth element of the title race where a team can feel good one week and then suddenly there's always a potential momentum shift because they're playing next the weekend after. So, I mean, a classic example is probably the last Premier League weekend when Arsenal got that late win against Everton, thanks to this great heralded club moment of Max Dowman's first goal and becoming the youngest ever Premier League goal scorer. And from speaking to people in football, there was a firm belief that had that not happened, City would immediately have gone on to beat West Ham. As it was, City went ahead in that game, then got pegged back by West Ham, only drew 1-1. And again, it's impossible not to feel that the Arsenal result was on their mind. So it is now that they go into this weekend with Arsenal playing first, that game against Bournemouth on Saturday. If they win, it will obviously carry the positive momentum from this victory over Sporting, carrying them through this difficult period where the team is, I think, visibly feeling fatigue, and suddenly put that onus back on City. Whereas going into this week's Champions League games, before Arsenal's win against Sporting, it felt like it was City that had the positive momentum again. And look, I know it's almost frustrating to listen to this because you can feel like it's going to be a constant back and forth, a constant talk of kind of change the momentum until it's actually settled. But that's where we are, and I think that's all the more relevant because it is ultimately a duel between a team of repeat winners, which is why I think there's always a sense that City are maybe given a bit more of the benefit of the doubt in these situations, and a team waiting to finally get that big trophy, that need to kind of unlock something that are Arsenal. And hence, mood becomes all the more important, especially when obviously Arsenal are surrounded by angst. And yes, it is all the more important given that Bournemouth do represent a really difficult challenge on Saturday. They're a tough team to play. Now, they themselves haven't played, in 4 weeks, actually. It seems very odd to be having such an extended Premier League break when the title race has been so intense. And also when, obviously, there's such a discussion at the moment about how football is, or the fixture list is so demanding that suddenly in kind of your bread and butter competition, the one you play the most, the league, that goes in this break, but such is the calendar right now. And such then is the potential effect of the calendar and the way games and results fall. And suddenly this Sporting game, which for 90 minutes had looked like it could be one where, yes, Arsenal get a result, but it still leaves a bit of doubt there. Suddenly it's the opposite, and they're feeling the good mood from this game. So yeah, I do think it is going to be crucial, because when you get to this stage of a title race, we speak to anyone who's been involved in one, anyone who's failed in one, anyone who's won one, and they talk about how it does become about perseverance. I think that is relevant as well to the nature of Martinelli's goal, and also the way Arsenal have been playing of late. Because like one of the great contrasts to City from the campaign and from recent performances, obviously City have, I would say, a higher level attack, or at least a higher performing attack. They've obviously got Haaland, that's just one thing, and like he's been on difficult form this season, or at least form that doesn't truly reflect his quality, or has been a drop off from recent seasons. Then he goes and scores a hat-trick against Liverpool like that, showing the capacity is there because he is the greatest forward in the world in that way, the greatest goal scorer in the world. Then we've got players like Cherki, who looks like to be going to a higher level. I think some of that also comes from the way Guardiola approaches the game and the way Arteta has come to approach the game more in the last 2 seasons, where with City or with Guardiola, there's still an element of a greater allowance of expressiveness in the final third. Everything with Arteta is so controlled. And there's also something, I think, and I wrote about this in my match report as well, where with a team like this, with a manager like this, who gets so close to the end goal they really want, and especially with all the surrounding noise and emotion around Arsenal, it's almost like they they're trying to grasp the opportunity. But in trying to grasp it, it's almost as if they're trying to assert more and more control. But the issue with control is, I suppose, that becomes sort of a results-based approach rather than a process-based approach. And it's often the process that leads you to the end product. Basically, essentially, if you keep doing what you do without fixating on the end goal, you will naturally get there. But while I think that is true for most of the season, in a run-in like this, it does really become about will, about just getting it done, about that perseverance, and hence mood and resolve becomes all the more important. I realise this has been a little bit of a more kind of maybe esoteric or abstract, should I say, inside football. But it's something I've been thinking about a lot, obviously over the past few days, given the discussion around Arsenal and City, and also from coming from that game. Like, just City had suddenly looked like a team revitalised. They were on form. They were free scoring again. Whereas Arsenal, it feels like every single goal right now is a battle. Hence, when one comes to you like that, in the way it did, in the context it did against Sporting, it can have a huge effect. And hence, I think the effect of mood on this title race is going to be huge. And also, I suppose, it does feed into this dynamic that is going to dominate the end of the season, where now it's over to the next stage of games. And so while momentum has shifted once more, the emotional momentum has gone a different way this week, the weekend it could go a completely different direction again. So Arsenal play first against Bournemouth on Saturday afternoon, an awkward tie. City have a difficult game away to Chelsea, who of course have requirements and difficulties and anxieties of their own. And yeah, hence, while I'd say 95 to 96 to 99% of football at this level is obviously tactics, quality, ability, wage bill, spending, all of those core elements, the final 1% that is so relevant in a run-in like this can really come down to something as intangible or abstract as emotion, as mood. And I think you saw a great example of that in Arsenal's win over Sporting. Anyway, this has been Miguel Delaney's Inside Football. You can check out my newsletter, obviously, which is of the same name, Inside Football, all my work on The Independent. And if you enjoy these videos, please like, subscribe, comment, and thank you. I'll see you next time. Cheers.